Hello, Star Wars fans. Today, rather than doing a simple review of Episode 2 of The Mandalorian, I decided instead to put together all the pieces of Mandalore history that I think are necessary to fully enjoying and fully understanding Mandalorian Season 3. Now, that did take me a bit more time, but I think it was well worth it. And I want to give a big shout out to Wikipedia, which is the website that has all the resources you would ever need to know about Star Wars. And also big thanks to Adrian from the Discord server. Really appreciate your help, man, in brainstorming this video. All right, so let's dive right in and put together the pieces of Mandalore history. So things started with Mandalore the Great, who was the first person to be given the title of Mandalore, the sole ruler of the planet. Now, this was thousands of years ago, BBY. I'm going to try down in the lower right-hand corner to call out some of the years for things, but a lot of times they just don't give us the years. I mean, this could have been even 10,000 years, BBY. But it was a long time ago. That's the key. Now, we learned way back in the first episode of The Mandalorian that Mandalore the Great tamed the now extinct Mythosaurs. When Din was told, your ancestors rode the Great Mythosaur. And this was referring to Mandalore the Great. Now, the Mythosaur symbol, even though they're extinct, are still very important to the Mandalorians. You see the symbol everywhere. I mean, you notice it there on Boba Fett's shoulder there, and in the armor's lair, she has a symbol of the Mandalore. Very, very important to the Mandalorians. All right, then legends do tell of the return of the Mythosaur. The armor explained at one point that key songs of eons past foretold of the Mythosaur rising up to herald a new age of Mandalore. And as we learn in the end of Episode 2, it appears the rumors of their extinction may have been premature, because that sure looks like a Mythosaur down there under the living waters that we saw at the very end of the episode. All right, so that raises the question, will we get something even cooler than this? Because I really loved Boba Fett riding the Rancor. That was awesome. But man, can you imagine Din riding on a Mythosaur and wielding the Darksaber? Oh man, come on, give it to me. Give it to me by the end of this season. That would be incredible. All right, so back to the history. So there were many civil wars between the Mandalorians, as well as huge fights with the Jedi Order. And this is what you're seeing here, Jedis versus Mandalorians. And remember, the Beskar armor can, protect it from the lightsabers. So actually, these were pretty evenly matched battles, I suspect. All right, so then, finally, Tarre Vizsla. Keep in mind that name, Vizla. That's a very important name. Tarre Vizsla was a Mandalorian who was inducted into the Jedi Order, and he created the Darksaber. Now, this was around 1,000 years BBY, maybe a little less, maybe a little more. Again, I'm not real sure because they don't really tell us. But Tarre Vizsla, again, created the Darksaber, huge and important. He then left the Jedi Order, and he conquered Mandalore. This united the warlords and the clans across Mandalore. Then, after his death, the sword, the Darksaber, was stored in the Jedi Temple. And then finally, after the Old Republic fell, Mandalorians regained the saber. However, without Tarre to unite them, the Mandalorians fought for centuries. That's something we're going to hear over and over again, by the way. Mandalorians fighting Mandalorians. This eventually resulted in a cataclysm which scorched much of Mandalore into a white, uninhabitable wasteland, and the Mandalorians created domed cities on the surface. Kind of depressing, really. Look at that thing. Man, what a bummer. It's just a reminder of what they did to their own planet. All right, so then we're going to move into something that's called Star Wars Legends, which means non-canon, but still highly regarded and good to reference. But we're also going to see this might be a little less of a legend than it seems right now. But that's why it's cartoon form. We've never seen these things in live action. But so around 58 BBY, someone named Jaster Mereel tries to hold the Mandalorians to a higher standard of behavior. And this put him at odds with Tarre Vizsla. There's that name Vizsla again, right? Who formed a splinter group known as Death Watch. So basically you have Jaster, who formed the True Mandalorians, sometimes called the New Mandalorians, and he was at odds with Death Watch and Tarre. Now, in the battles that ensued, the family of a young Jango Fett, I'm sure you recognize that name, was killed by Tarre Vizsla, and Jango was taken in by Jaster and given armor. And then, unfortunately, eventually, Jaster himself was killed by Vizla. So, Jango, not surprisingly, now with his armor, avenged Jaster by himself, killing Tor Vizsla. So, what's interesting is, I've said this was Legends, right? But in season 2 of Mandalorian, when Boba Fett showed the Mandalorian his chain codes, notice in there, several lines down, it says mentor was Jaster. It doesn't have the R, but it was maybe cut off because the letters were gone. Jaster was the mentor of his father, Jango Fett. So they may well have canonized Jaster with this chain code. By the way, I didn't translate this, so if it's wrong, I apologize. It was a Reddit post that translated it. But yeah, this was really exciting. I love the fact that Dave Filoni continues to canonize some of the Legends material. So anyway, Jango Fett, of course, went on to become a bounty hunter, and of course he became the template for the clones that we saw in the Clone Wars. And then eventually, he even asked for his own unaltered clone that he would then raise as his son. All right, so back to the history of Mandalore. So the new Mandalorians formed a peaceful movement in an attempt to end the cycle of violence that almost destroyed their planet. So now we're around 42 BBY. So this, by the way, that is still before Phantom Menace episode 1 of the Star Wars prequel trilogy. Then, what a surprise, another civil war broke out around 42 BBY. Now, Satine, I should mention, Duchess Satine Kryze was a very important figure around this time, and she rose to prominence and eventually rose to leadership. And her sister is Bo-Katan Kryze. So, very interesting. That's going to come up a lot. That's going to be sister versus sister we're going to see before long. And I got to say again, I love how much Katie Sackhoff looks like her character, Bo-Katan. Now, of course, on the right, this is her in the present day, and on the left, she looks a lot younger, but that's because this is much earlier in the timeline. So, wow, just so stinking cool. She is a boss. All right. Bo-Katan mentions that Satine and Bo lost their father during the wars. And probably one of the most touching scenes, I thought, in episode 2 was when the Mandalorian, Din, just said, "This is the way," and honors her father. She didn't even know what to say. Kind of snapped then, if you remember, at Grogu, because she just was a little embarrassed, a little touched by it. But so I think this is very important that they lost their father during these civil wars. I'm going to bring that up again in a minute, but I think that is a very important moment in Bo's life. All right, so during these civil wars is where a young Obi-Wan actually meets Satine, and they kind of fell in love. They didn't act on that love, but they definitely fell in love. Now, this is, again, prior to Phantom Menace, even though I know this image is from Phantom Menace, but it's around that time frame. We're talking about 41 to 39 BBY. So it's very interesting that the Jedis, who used to be fighting Mandalorians all the time, are now actually helping protect them. Okay, so finally, they win this war, and Death Watch is exiled to the moon Concordia. Remember, Death Watch is that group that Tor Vizsla had created. In fact, the Vizsla name we're going to see keeps sticking with Death Watch. Okay, so I love this quote that Bo-Katan gave in episode 2, where she talks about the pointless fighting in Mandalorian history. She says, "What pains me is seeing our own kind fight one another time and time again, killing each other for reasons too confusing to explain." I had to chuckle, because you have to wonder if that's Dave Filoni kind of just admitting with a little mea culpa, yeah, it really is confusing. The reasons they all kept fighting each other, very confusing. So yes, thank you, Bo, at least for acknowledging the truth. All right, so now we have about 20 years of peace, and we're down to 22 BBY. So we moved from before Phantom Menace, now we're in the middle of the Clone Wars, and what a surprise, another civil war breaks out. This time it's Death Watch, once again, being frustrated about the pacifist views of Satine Kryze. So pre-Vizsla, another Vizsla, Tor Vizsla, of course, was killed. So now we have pre-Vizsla leading the Death Watch to try and overthrow Satine. So here's what's crazy. Now we're 20 years later, right, from before, but still, one of the strongest allies is Bo-Katan herself. So you have to wonder, does Bo-Katan look back on all this and say, Maybe I was wrong to join Death Watch and fight to have my own sister overthrown. Maybe that was a mistake. In fact, you wonder, when Din learns this history, will he be disappointed in Bo? Lots to discuss for those two. But okay, so pre-Vizsla, along with Bo-Katan and Death Watch, did form a short partnership with Dooku and the Separatists. But of course, you can't trust Dooku, so he ends up betraying pre-Vizsla, and instead, pre-Vizsla decides to team up with Darth Maul. Man, talk about out of the pan and into the fire. My goodness. So now they have come up with this plan where Maul looks like the bad guy and Death Watch swoops in to rescue Mandalore and capture him, and now Pre-Vizsla can take over, right? Well, yes, that's exactly what he does, but unfortunately for Maul, he imprisons him for real. Maul doesn't take that too well. What a surprise. Maul breaks out, ends up fighting Vizsla, fighting him while he's wielding the Darksaber, mind you, and Maul kills Vizsla, and now he wins in combat the Darksaber. Very interesting. So actually, he's one of the first in recent history to have won the Darksaber in combat. So that now means Maul is in charge of Mandalore. I'm betting that is not going to make Bo happy. Oh, no, it's not. So Bo realizes finally the error of her ways, that basically she's helped, instead of putting Pre-Vizsla and Death Watch in charge of Mandalore, she's helped put Darth Maul in charge of Mandalore. So she rebels against Maul and vows to dethrone him. And she and the Night Owls, her group, take off and flee. In the meantime, during lots of things happen, but Maul actually ends up killing Satine, and in fact does it with Obi-Wan present. Remember, I mentioned earlier that the two were in love. They never acted on that love, but were definitely in love. So very touching, very sad. And once again, you wonder if Bo is looking back and going, man, what a mess I've created. I mean, sure, she disagreed with her sister and her pacifist views, but did she really want her sister to get killed? I doubt it. So, of all things, though, now we're into Clone Wars Season 6, Darth Sidious then fights and defeats Maul. You're like, wait a minute, what? Why is Darth Sidious suddenly getting involved? Well, for many confusing reasons, but the biggest thing to note here is Darth Sidious defeats Maul and takes him away. Carts him off from Mandalore. I'm not even sure who was in charge of Mandalore at this point, but we don't see Maul for a while. We'll come back to him, don't worry. In the meantime, at least according to Wikipedia, 20 to 19 BBY, which is the time frame we're in, is when Death Watch rescues young Din Djarin, i.e. the Mandalorian. You know, remember, they found him and carted him off. So is this potentially because Death Watch got driven off of Mandalore when Darth Maul was defeated? I'm not sure. I'd really love to know, and I hope they fill in this history. And in fact, if anyone watching wants to comment and tell me if you know exactly when in the chronology Death Watch rescues Din and why they rescued him, you know, why they were on that planet. Lots of questions still to be answered there. Hopefully we're going to get them in Season 3 of Mandalorian. Then the next big question. This is so wild. So at some point, Din was taken in by the children of the Watch. You remember Bo-Katan explains to him, you are a child of the Watch. Okay, so that means originally, Din would have been part of Death Watch, which is where Bo was. So they probably met each other when Bo was much younger, and Din was very young, so he probably doesn't even remember it. But why did the children of the Watch break off? That's another big question we don't have an answer for. Obviously, the children of the Watch believe in keeping your helmets on, and obviously, you know, Death Watch and the Night Owls that Bo-Katan's part of couldn't care less, and they take their helmet off all the time. So this certainly explained the difference in their beliefs. But why did the children of the Watch form? Okay, here's a crazy theory, and I want to give Ryan Airy from Screen Crush credit for this. Look at those horns on the armorer's helmet. Whose horns do those remind you of? Darth Maul comes to mind for me. Is it possible that there were certain members of Death Watch that felt that it was a good idea to actually have Darth Maul in charge of Mandalore, and that those are the children of the Watch? Don't know. I don't have a clue, but it's awfully interesting that those spikes are on the armorer's helmet. So anyway, speaking of Darth Maul, what the heck happened to him? Well, what happened to him is that Clone Wars was canceled. And so they never finished season 6, because season 6 would have answered why Darth Sidious fought him and took him off to Dathomir. But to make up for that, there was a comic, which is considered canon, called Darth Maul, Son of Dathomir. And in it, we learn that Sidious didn't even really want Darth Maul. He was just bait to get revenge on others. And, once he got that revenge, he let Darth Maul go and gave him back the Darksaber. Crazy, huh? But even stranger, it seems like Darth Maul left the Darksaber on Dathomir and didn't bring it with him, because we don't see it when he's next on Mandalore. By the way, notice on the far left, the comic cover. Look at the Death Watch members that rescue him. They got horns on their helmet. I'm just saying. Really interesting, huh? All right, so now we know why on the left, Season 6 of Clone Wars shows us Darth Maul in charge of Mandalore with the Darksaber. But then Season 7, which you remember when Disney had purchased Star Wars and put Clone Wars on Disney+, they commissioned a 7th season. Well, the 7th season picks up, and Darth Maul's right back again, running up Mandalore, and he doesn't have the Darksaber. I have no idea why they didn't seek to explain this. I mean, it confused the snot out of me. I had to go do all this research to even understand it. I wish they would have gone ahead and done the episodes that told us about the Son of Dathomir comics. Why didn't they convert these into episodes? Would have really helped. But so if you've ever wondered why Darth Maul looks one way at the end of Season 6 and another way in the beginning of Season 7, now you know why. But anyway, so yes, Darth Maul does return to Mandalore, takes over again. Notice the horns on the helmet of the guy there in front of him putting on the helmet. And then now Bo-Katan and Ursa Wren. Ursa Wren will be Sabine Wren's mom, and we're going to mention Sabine Wren a bunch coming up. But Bo-Katan and Ursa Wren team up with Ahsoka Tano and to do one last major final charge to liberate Mandalore. We get some awesome battles between Darth Maul and Ahsoka Tano. And, of course, Ahsoka and Bo are all victorious. They defeat Maul and liberate Mandalore. Bo-Katan is then made the regent of Mandalore by the Republic. So finally, she gets what she's always wanted, to rule Mandalore. Well, not for long. Because, of course, as she explains and kind of is wincing as she's explaining it in Episode 2, that she has a very brief rule. As she said, I once ruled here for a brief time. So what does she mean by that? Well, it's the fact that the New Republic might have put her in charge, but it wasn't long before the Senate was disassembled and the Empire was fully put in place. And the Empire said, yeah, Bo, we don't really like you. We're going to put this guy in charge because he seems a little more, willing to do what we want him to do. So the Empire basically put Gar Saxon in charge of Mandalore, meaning Bo-Katan's rule was not very long. I wish I knew exactly how long. Again, they don't really tell us. But nonetheless, we then pick up the story with a very young Sabine Wren being born as the daughter of Ursa Wren. And then as she grows up, she obviously grows up on Mandalore and therefore has the Mandalorian armor. And then she makes a very unwise decision. She creates a machine which it turns out can be used to destroy Beskar armor. It can destroy other things too, but it can actually destroy the very armor that Mandalorians rely on. So once Sabine realizes the Empire might decide to use this against, obviously, Mandalore, she destroys it. Or so we think. So why do I mention this? Well, another interesting theory is, remember that helmet that we saw in Episode 2 that was so destroyed looking? Is it possible that that machine that Sabine Wren created still is around? And is that maybe how Moff Gideon was able to attack and be so victorious when he fought the Mandalorians? Did he have this machine? I don't know. All I know is Beskar armor should not look like this. It shouldn't be rusty and destroyed like that. So who knows? Just throwing out that maybe that machine mentioned in Rebels may come back to haunt the Mandalorians. All right. Anyway, following on with Sabine. Finally, in 2 BBY, so we're all the way up to 2 BBY, Sabine finds the Darksaber on Dathomir. Because remember, as I said, it seems like Darth Maul just left it there, which is so bizarre. But I guess he was just tired of it. He wanted to use his lightsaber again. Okay, great. So now Sabine has the Darksaber. So she goes and fights and defeats Gar Saxon, remember, who was running Mandalore. And after another civil war, what a surprise, Sabine leads the team to victory and ultimately gives the Darksaber over to Bo-Katan. So kind of keep this picture in mind of, Bo's face and the Darksaber being handed to her. In this case, she does accept it. She takes it, and she begins leading Mandalore once again. So very exciting, right? Although 2 BBY, so we're very, very close to the original trilogy, Episode 4, A New Hope. But just before the Empire is defeated in A New Hope, they carry out the Great Purge and just pretty much decimate Mandalore. As though it wasn't already pretty badly decimated, it's really decimated after this. And we learn that during this battle, Moff Gideon defeats Bo-Katan and takes the Darksaber from her. Now, this image is from the end of Mandalorian Season 1, but nonetheless, it's just to remind you that, somehow Moff Gideon defeated Bo-Katan and got a hold of the Darksaber. All right, so now we're to present day. Now we're all the way up to Season 2 of Mandalorian. Din Djarin meets Bo-Katan, and they decide to team up together. And remember, eventually, at the end of Season 2, Din defeats Moff Gideon in a awesome battle. I mean, notice he's got the Beskar spear, and that was able to hold off the Darksaber. And so Din defeats Moff Gideon and now has the Darksaber. And then I love how they recreated the scene almost. Instead of Sabine Wren handing the Darksaber to Bo-Katan, now it's Din Djarin handing it to Bo-Katan. But you can just see the look on her face. She just does not like this situation, and she wisely refuses to accept the Darksaber. So, why does she do that? Well, we then learn later about Bo-Katan's failure to rule Mandalore and how the Armorer, at least, views it. The Armorer says she once laid claim to rule Mandalore based purely on blood and the sword you now possess. If, however, it is not won in combat and falls into the hands of the undeserving, it will be a curse unto the nation. So you do not want to take the Darksaber unless you win it in combat. So then we also learn that Din is unable to wield the Darksaber, and the Armorer explains it's due to your lack of focus. So, of course, he's got many different things going on. Grogu is on his mind. Also, atoning for taking off his helmet is on his mind, which she says, you need to bathe in those waters of Mandalore, which we see at the end of Season 2 or Episode 2. But anyway, Din is unable to wield the Darksaber. He does use it to try to fight Paz Vizsla. By the way, Paz Vizsla, that House of Vizla, yet again lives on. A pretty spectacular looking battle, but Din is really, really not able to use the Darksaber. And I'm sure everybody knows this, but I'll still point out, Paz Vizsla is voiced by Jon Favreau, who of course voiced pre-Vizsla all those years before. So pretty cool. In fact, you wonder if eventually Paz Vizsla will take off his helmet and we will see Jon Favreau underneath there. That'd be cool, if so. But even if Din is not able to use the Darksaber, boy, Bo-Katan sure is. And that's because she does have a single focus. She wants to rule Mandalore. Yeah, she has her doubts that it's worth it, and people have deserted her, but still, she has a single focus, a single passion, and that's what lets her use the Darksaber so well. All right, and in fact, so well that she just rocks this cyborg creature. What a cool battle. Man, I would love some more of this type of creature to show up in later episodes this season. It was so sweet. All right, so Bo-Katan does reveal she actually took the creed. So notice at some point, Death Watch had the creed. It's just they pretty much stopped following it, and Children of the Watch took it over. By the way, notice yet again, not just horns on the armor, but look at those horns on other people's helmets too. Just very, very interesting. All right, so finally, the episode ends with both Din and Bo-Katan ending up entering the waters. Din entering them willingly, and Bo then flying in to rescue after Din gets drug under. So finally, we do see the mythosaur at the bottom with his tusk or his claw. It's unsure what that is. His tooth, sorry. But it does raise the question, how is Din going to prove to the armor that he bathed in the waters? Please tell me that he doesn't have to remove one of those tusks. But yeah, boy, there you go. My review and my feelings about and reactions to episode 2, but also sharing a lot of the history of Mandalore along the way. So leave down in the comments your thoughts on some of these questions. Do you think Bo-Katan regrets the things that she's done? Do you think she understands the damage that she caused by fighting her sister? What made her decide to leave being basically a princess there in Mandalore to go and fight against Mandalore? What created the Children of the Watch? Why did they get created? And why did the Death Watch even rescue Din Djarin? And then how did he end up with Children of the Watch? So many questions to be answered. But I'd love your thoughts on them. And also, do you think Din will be riding a mythosaur by the time season 3 ends? I sure hope so. All right. So also, don't forget, we do have a Discord server. Lots of Star Wars chatter, more and more by the day. And I will leave a pinned comment with a link to join the server. Love to have you join and be part of the conversation. Also, like this video if you don't mind. Subscribe if you haven't already. You can check out more content, and we'll all continue to enjoy The Mandalorian Season 3.